Yes, good morning and welcome. You're still watching Power Breakfast right here on Citizen TV. It's that time when we take a look at the headlines this morning. We're privileged to have on my left Mark Vichachi, and on my right Rafael Obonyo. They will make up my panel this morning for the news review. Of course, we could be joined by other panelists in a short while. But let's kick off. A quick look at the headlines. And the biggest story on the Daily Nation today, 360,000 election jobs up for grabs. Security staff, polling clerks, presiding officers, IT and logistics experts. IT. Big demand. Polling clerks, 262,665. These are jobs that are available. 91,000 presiding officers, 91,000 deputy presiding officers, ICT clerks, once again, ward educators, logistical officers. Wow. That's the biggest headline of the Daily Nation. The big one on the Standard still has to do with the processes for the elections. Major win for IEBC ahead of crucial ruling. D-Day Commission won big yesterday when KI's case questioning entire electronic election system was thrown out, as ruling is expected today on appeal against nullification of Al Ghurair presidential ballot tender. Of course, that's the biggest headline. Also on the front page of the Standard, on the top strip, Biwot's 3 wives and the Ukomada, total man's family. Biwot's body arrives in his birthplace as 2 other wives embrace the family's matriarch Hani. The first wife tells Kenyans Biwot was a good man and did not kill Robert Ouko. A very good read. You should read it for yourself. Also making headlines this morning on the Daily Nation, and this story is highlighted on both front pages of the dailies that we have. The biggest mistake of their lives. 3 gentlemen are there: Edwin Dungu, Meshak Mburu Mwangi, Nicholas Chege. In September 2014, these 3 men, 2 of them part of a matatu crew and the other a petrol station attendant, sexually assaulted a female passenger inside a bus in Githurai, Nairobi. Now yesterday, a Nairobi court found them guilty of robbery with violence and sentenced them to death. That story is also highlighted on the Standard, the front page. Stripping woman and 3 men a death sentence. Now this is one story that's going to definitely make for a lot of discussions this week. We had a lot of headlines to do with the elections and the electoral processes. Now this story that happened yesterday is definitely something that people have to talk about and will talk about. Yeah. Mark Pichachi, your thoughts on this?
You know, it's actually a very good thing for the cause of women in this country. You know, for a very long time we perpetuated the myth that women get raped or abused because of how they dress. The reality is it's because of how men imagine that they abuse women. So the good thing is, for once, someone is paying the price. I remember in 2014 there were like around 3-4 cases where certain matatus, Embasava being one of them, were mentioned in harassing women, and it's a good thing for this nation to finally get to a place where people pay the price for harassing women. And the funny thing is, they were actually sentenced for robbery with violence. Yes. That's the bigger thing, because the molestation was 25 years. And that sentence is in abeyance, because yes, if I told you, you've already been sentenced to death, you know. So basically, the sentencing to death, I think personally, and I hate to say someone deserves to die, but the law does state that robbery with violence has only one form of punishment, which is hanging, and I think they deserve to hang for the sake of those women who've been abused before by men. And I think it's a lesson for men out there that just because a girl is dressed a certain way does not give you certain access. And to matatu crews now, because yes, they've been accused over and over, but nothing gets done. In fact, you cannot even report such a case to police. You rarely do. This case only came to the fore because of that video that went viral. It's not a police investigation that led to their arrest. But to matatu crews, this is just a special warning to them.
I think it's a strong statement by the court. It's not just a win for women. I think it's a win for all of us, the society, that it's going to be very, very expensive for you to violate women, not just because of the way they are dressed, but just because they are women. And I think this is one of the strongest statements that we've had. And I think you saw women come out on the streets, my dress, my choice, and I think they really won big.
Yes. Yeah. And the beauty of this verdict is that even if they go to the Court of Appeal and appeal this death sentence.
Yes.
The sexual assault sentence is
25
years.
Yeah.
So definitely, they one way or another they have to pay.
True. And you know, the thing is, you have to wonder, what did her dressing have to do with her phone and her power banks and the other things that they stole from her? You know, the reality is a lot of these guys were opportunists, looking, you know, busybodies, just waiting for an opportunity to harass somebody. And I think we need to even go further. You know, those people who whistle at women at the barber shop, that's also wrong. It's abusive. Those guys who a woman refuses to talk to you and you abuse her, or you call her a hoe because she refused your advances. All of these things need to actually stop in this country, and men need to start respecting women. In fact, for me, the win will be when a man is charged with verbal abuse as well.
Because I think there's a lot of impunity. People thought they could just do anything and get away with it. These three gentlemen, I'm sure this was the list.
They imagined
could not imagine it.
In fact, none of us even thought it would go this far, because we've seen many of those cases, but they never get this kind of punishment. And so I think it's not just a surprise to them, it's a surprise to many of us. But I think it's, like I said, it's a stern warning to anyone who thinks they can violate the rights of women and get away with it. And in this era of technology, you don't have to wait until you are reported. I think citizens are taking sort of action, and they're becoming more active in terms of ensuring that they are vigilant and that the law, and people who violate women face the full wrath of the law.
Yes, and very interestingly, they say that the wheels of justice turn very slowly. This one's turned really
fast.
No, actually, you know, as far as court cases going in this country, it's actually pretty fast. That's the most surprising thing. It's actually pretty fast. And the thing that I'm also interested to see, there is the new trend called body shaming, where you use the online space, your girlfriend dumps you, and then you put pictures. Rob Kardashian did that the other day. It's also wrong. It's abuse. You understand? Because how are you taking someone's body and exposing it and shaming them because they dumped you?
Now that's a new frontier.
Yes, it's a new frontier, online bullying as well, where you create a fake story and you post it in Kilimani moms and dads and say so and so is like this and this. The reality of this needs to stop. Kenyans, we need to get to a point where we can solve our disputes at home. There's no point of having these things exposed on the internet.
Yes, you've mentioned something very interesting, and I think it's on the dailies, about fake news. And there was a poll yesterday about fake news. I don't know if I can trace it. I think it's on the Daily Nation. Very interestingly, the number of fake news that shows up every time you check out your Facebook page, your Twitter handle, or even this other social media. The number of fake news sites that are there. Social media blamed for fake news. That stories on page 9 of the Daily Nation. Social media private messaging applications have been flagged as the biggest sources of fake news ahead of the general election. Of course, this has to do with the elections, but as you said, you can come up with a fake story about someone you do not like, and it will come out as believable.
You know, the funniest thing about us human beings is we like bad news and we like sensational news. So basically what happens, there are two categories of political fake news. There's false headlining. Okay, so we say bombshell, come and see what Fred was doing with this lady, you know, and it turns out he was eating dinner. You know, that's one category of fake news, sensationalization of what is actually real, or just creating a totally false narrative for political gain, or for the malice, creating malice against a certain person. Now, the reality of the matter is in as much as the Caparo-led commission is concerned about fake news, there's very little you can do given the sheer volume of people who are able to produce this thing. So it is actually more of a societal question where we are able to call these people out one-to-one versus trusting a commission to be able to deal with it. It will be very difficult to get.
And I saw one story, and this has to do with the elections, insinuating that one of the presidential candidates was seeking the services of a Sangoma in South Africa, and you could see the pictures were clearly photoshopped because it's an old photo of the same person used here. But some people, I actually had one of the very senior bishops in this country commenting on that story very seriously, that no, this leader should not be seeking the services, we will not allow this. And you can actually tell it's such a fake story. That means it is believable. Social media right now can shape a lot of this propaganda and is being used to actually channel it.
True, true. I mean, in this era of technology, everyone wants to create news, you know, and unfortunately, we do not have a lot of time and luxury to verify whatever is posted or we share, and I think that's quite unfortunate. So we end up with a lot of falsehoods, you know. We end up with a lot of information that is not verifiable, but it's also not true. Unfortunately, you see, I know NCIC is trying to come up with actually they've already gazetted the guidelines.
They've been gazetted, yes.
Yeah, just to make sure that we stop this kind of trend. But I totally agree with Mark that I mean, we can't deal with it through regulation. I think
the
we need
guidelines
to
mostly handle political messaging, when you're sending messages out there and hate speech and such like. But fake news,
fake news is tricky because you see, how do you verify news? You know, that's the most difficult thing. You see, if I come up and I say, well, we're in the waiting lounge with this gentleman, he slapped me. You understand? And he slapped me softly, so there is no marks on on my cheek. So the thing about fake news and what becomes critical in this day and age is being able to train the public. For example, how do you tell a photo has been photoshopped? How do you tell a story is fake? What this commission needs to do is actually educate Kenyans in the reality of how to check what fake news is. You know, has it come from a verifiable source? Is the Twitter handle verified? You know, questions like that enable you to be able to detect fake news.
But do you think that this fake news, because there's been a huge difference technologically since the last time we had an election, between 2013 and 2014, so much has changed in terms of how we use WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat and all these things.
Social media platforms.
So much has changed in the last 4 years. How much of this do you think will play into this election?
Wow, actually a great
in terms of propaganda and all these things.
A great deal. Number one, the fastest way to spread propaganda is via WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups, and Facebook messages. After a while, why WhatsApp groups? One of the things that the government doesn't usually say is that WhatsApp is now encrypted, end-to-end encryption. So basically, there is the security of knowing I can write something and the government will not be able to know. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this: that if you look at the sheer number, thanks to companies like Oppo and Techno and all these companies that have really brought down the cost of internet connectivity and the gadgets that go with it, is that it's no longer a game of having 3-4 million people on these platforms. Right now, 18 million Kenyans are online. That means almost every adult is online, and that tells you that they have the access to this information. So propaganda, definitely a big deal. And if propaganda is a big deal, then electronic devices and electronic media and social media have a direct impact on the election.
And that's true. I mean, the number of people who are accessing internet now has increased. Actually, they say threefold in the last 5 years, and so it means that that becomes a new frontier and a new space for you know, political mobilization and political engagement. In terms of what NCIC is trying to do, I think it comes late in the day. We just 20 days to election. There's already a lot of information that has been circulating on social media, so I don't think it will help as much. And like you said, I mean, groups like WhatsApp, it's very difficult, and NCIC does not have the capacity to monitor and make sure that people are responsible. I think it goes back to citizens themselves. I think we need to find ways of creating awareness amongst ourselves and make sure that we are responsible online.
Do you think the Kenyan population, now that you're saying 18 million, access the internet, do they understand the implications? Do we know that yes, there is the existence of fake news? I've seen even journalists fall for such headlines.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, because we are living in the era of, someone said, one of the South African musicians once said that we are living in an era of so much information but very little truth. But again, we don't spend time to verify whatever we are receiving and what we are sharing. You post something on Facebook, and before long it has traveled miles and miles.
Whether it's true or not.
Yeah, whether it's true or not, and the responsibility is not with you. It keeps moving, and no one cares, and that's the unfortunate part.
And the truth is, it's an international question. Facebook and Google have been asked many times by both the Europeans and the Americans to come up with a way of regulating fake news. Now, you see, they're not a news agency themselves, so the jury is still out on how, whether the internet giants such as Google, Yahoo, and the rest will be able to weed out fake news.
Do you think they can?
It's a tall order. It's a tall order unless they invest massive amounts of human resources.
People who use Facebook.
Exactly. You know, and if, in fact, interestingly, Fred, do you know how many WhatsApp messages we send in Kenya a day? About 3 billion.
3 billion.
3 billion WhatsApp messages in Kenya.
So much,
in Kenya.
So according to this poll, they say 2 companies say 90% of the 2,000 people interviewed reported having seen fake news in May when the poll was conducted.
Yes.
90%, that's 1,800 out of 2,000 people.
Yes.
They saw fake news. They found that social media is being referenced relatively regularly, with a total of 49% receiving news about the general election through this medium. Actually, we are discussing more about the election on social media than ever before. That whatever, even the size of crowds. I've seen once one candidate goes this side, they have to take a photo of the best crowd they had and post it, juxtapose it against the other side. This time round, social media is really huge.
It's huge. It's huge because at the end of the day, you see, news informs, social media influences. Why? Because social media gets into the place where I have my family there, I have my brothers, I have my sisters. So basically, the amount of trust I place on social media is higher than what I place on the media. So what happens is the media can inform me, but the ability and viability of a narrative is more on my social media, because that's where I get my personal information from. And that's why this particular thing it's very critical, you know, and it will be foolhardy. There's some politicians I know who've ignored social media. I'm waiting to see the results come this election.
Yes, of course, the other big headline has to do with cholera. And it's very interesting that now the caliber of hotels we're seeing being shut down, because we've always assumed cholera is a poor man's disease, only found in slums. And a very interesting cartoon on the Daily Nation today. Yes, there's an ambulance there, and some people who look like they're not doing so well are saying it's Mheshimiwa suffering from cholera. After milking us dry, they're now taking our diseases. That's a cartoon on the front page of the Daily Nation. But it's we're living in very interesting times.
We're living in interesting times. Cholera was a disease that you could find in places like Korogosho, Mathare, Kibera. I mean, but now we are finding it in, you know, 5-star hotels, you know, convention centers in the city. But
perhaps it needed to get to that level so that we can actually look at it and handle it seriously.
I mean, to some extent, it's never a problem until it gets to people who are policymakers or people who matter, you know. And I think now everyone knows that we need to take issues of hygiene seriously. We need to take things of provision of clean water, clean and safe water, more seriously. So it's unfortunate, especially people who've been affected, especially in the high-end areas. But I think now we're going to see more action. In fact, we've seen how the Ministry of Health has really moved fast, you know.
And I think it needed look at it. Mark, it took a wedding in Karen. For us to start putting cholera on the front pages. Then a trade conference where 2 cabinet ministers were actually hospitalized.
But this is something that has always affected people in poor neighborhoods.
I think you're being too nice to the government. It is the job of the public health department to prevent such things. But you see, it's already a failure when there are cases of cholera reported anywhere. I don't care whether it's Korogosho or Karen. In fact, a good friend of mine almost died. The doctor said that if he had not come home, come to the hospital an hour before he would have died. So here's the reality. Number one, cholera is not a poor person disease, it is not a rich person disease. It is a disease that is caused by failed systems within any particular jurisdiction. The other place that is suffering from cholera is Yemen, and they are at war. What is wrong with us Kenyans? You know, that's the reality. Are we at war? No, we are not. We are just careless, and we're not taking care of our people. That's the problem.
One of the headlines about cholera is on page 4 of the Standard. Why cholera outbreak was not a bolt out of the blue. Health authorities were warned that street foods in Nairobi had dangerous germs as early as January. Now, if you were to quote, the study overseen by Peter Wanzala of Cambridge, however, found contamination with human fecal matter or fecal coliforms as high as 100% in some types of foods such as boiled eggs and kachumbari.
Imagine.
That's salad. Now this was reported as early as January, but no one was taking it seriously until it hits a five-star hotel.
Because we like engaging in knee-jerk reaction. You know, we like waiting until something happens. We saw, for example, the collapse of buildings in the building in Uruma. That's when we started saying, oh, we need to take certain measures and all that. But then after that, we again stopped, and we are waiting for another one to collapse. And I think that's the same thing with cholera. I mean, we do not take preventive measure, either because the system is not functioning or we just have an incompetent public service.
I have a question. I want you to imagine with me an egg and kachumbari. How does an egg come into contact with fecal matter? How does kachumbari come into contact with fecal matter?
It's the handling.
No, it's here's the thing. You see, even if it's the handling, this guy, how much fecal matter can he have that it's in 100% of the eggs? It means you understand, because it's 100%. You understand? So here's the issue, Fred. The issue is this: that the reality is, you know, have you gone to Eastlands and you've seen those people who plant vegetables next to the sewer lines? This is where the problem is that we have a society where we cultivate problems. Literally, we dig a hole and plant a problem and harvest a problem and then eat the problem.
Are we saying that now that these vegetables that are cultivated along the sewer lines are making their way to five-star hotels?
Yes.
Wow. Finally, it hits home. 2 cabinet secretaries were hospitalized last week, in the last 2 weeks, following that outbreak. Two big hotels in Nairobi have been shut down, and more to come. We'll continue discussing this, even as we welcome more panelists to my news review team this morning. Let's take a break. Our breakfast continues.